Commander Zethkar of the Hegemony's Third Assault Fleet watched the blue-green marble of Earth through the viewport of his flagship, the inevitable Victory. His forearms gestured dismissively at the tactical display, showing the primitive human settlements scattered across the planet's surface. This is what the Council fears? He clicked in the Hegemony's primary language, his mandibles chattering with amusement. These soft-bodied mammals who've barely crawled out of their gravity well? Admiral Vextra, his second-in-command, consulted her bioscanner readings. Their physiology is peculiar, Commander. Dense bone structure, redundant organ systems, and their muscle-to-mass ratio suggests they evolved in a hostile environment. But their technology is centuries behind ours. Zethkar's four eyes focused on the data streams. Humans had achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 standard cycles ago, a mere blink in galactic time. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles and crude energy beams. Their ships were bulky, inefficient designs that wasted massive amounts of energy just to maintain basic life support. Send the standard ultimatum, he ordered. Unconditional surrender or face annihilation. These humans will serve as adequate slaves for the Outer Rim mining operations. The message was transmitted to every human communication relay, translated by the Hegemony's linguistic AI into their primitive languages. Within hours, the response came back through their crude radio signals, a simple, two-word phrase that their translators struggled to interpret properly. Get fucked. Admiral Vextra read from the translation matrix, her tone uncertain. Commander, our linguistic protocol suggests this is a rejection of our terms, accompanied by an invitation to perform a biologically impossible act? Zethkar's mandibles clicked harder. Impossible. No species has ever rejected the Hegemony's offer of servitude. Perhaps their primitive minds cannot comprehend the scope of our power. He gestured to the tactical officer. Demonstrate our superiority. Destroy one of their orbital installations, something small to show we're serious. The Third Fleet's 12 dreadnoughts aligned their plasma cannons toward a human space station orbiting their moon. The weapons charged with familiar efficiency, building to the devastating crescendo that had reduced 1,000 worlds to ash and compliance. But something was wrong. The human station wasn't running. It wasn't broadcasting surrender signals. Instead, it was turning toward them. Ancient-looking weapon ports were opening along its hull, revealing arrays of crude kinetic launchers. Commander, the sensor operator's voice carried a note of confusion. The humans are launching projectiles at us. Simple tungsten rods, no guidance systems, no exotic materials. They're firing chunks of metal. Zethkar's laughter rippled through the bridge. They think to threaten us with thrown rocks? Target that station and... The first tungsten rod struck the unyielding Supremacy, the fleet's second-largest dreadnought. It punched through the ablative armor like it was made of vapor, then the secondary hull, then the tertiary barriers that had stopped the weapons of a dozen species. The rod passed completely through the ship and emerged from the other side, leaving a perfectly cylindrical hole through which atmosphere and crew were rapidly evacuating. How is that possible? Vextra stared at the tactical display. That projectile was traveling at only 0.23 C. Our shields should have... Another rod struck, this time hitting the inevitable Victory's starboard weapons array. The impact sent shockwaves through the hull that made Zethkar's exoskeleton ache. Warning lights flashed as entire sections lost power. Shields at 60%, the defense coordinator reported, his voice tight with disbelief. Commander, that projectile had the kinetic energy of a small star going nova. Zethkar's four eyes widened as understanding dawned. Their planet... What's the gravitational index? 9.8 meters per second squared, the science officer replied. Nearly twice galactic standard. And their atmospheric composition? 21% oxygen, highly reactive. It should be toxic to most carbon-based life. The pieces fell into place like fragments of a shattered reality. Humans hadn't evolved on a normal world. They'd crawled out of a high-gravity death trap, where the very air was combustible. Their primitive bodies were forged in an environment that would crush most galactic species. Their redundant organs existed because their homeworld regularly tried to kill them. And their inefficient ships weren't wasting energy on life support. They were using the excess power to accelerate simple chunks of matter to relativistic speeds. More tungsten rods slammed into the fleet. The crushing Dawn lost its primary reactor when a projectile struck its engineering section. The terror of enemies began listing to port as its artificial gravity generators failed. Ships that had conquered star systems were being crippled by what amounted to very fast rocks. "New contacts," the sensor operator called out. "Human ships, emerging from behind their moon." Zethkar stared at the tactical display as dozens of human vessels revealed themselves. They weren't sleek or elegant like proper military craft. They looked like flying industrial equipment, ugly, blocky, and covered in oversized thruster arrays and weapon mounts that no sane engineer would approve. But they moved with a terrible purpose, accelerating at rates that should have liquefied their crews. Each ship trailed a wake of superheated particles as they pushed their engines beyond any reasonable safety margin. "They're accelerating at 12 standard gravities," Vextra reported, her voice hollow. "Their crews should be dead." "Not if they evolved on a world where 12 gravities is survivable," Zethkar realized. "Signal the fleet. Emergency withdrawal to—" The human ships opened fire. Where the hegemony's weapons were elegant plasma, streams, and quantum disruptors, the humans simply threw things very, very hard. Tungsten rods, depleted uranium slugs, and chunks of asteroid rock streaked across space at significant fractions of light speed. No fancy technology, no exotic physics, just matter moving fast enough to punch holes through anything it touched. The vengeful Talon exploded when a projectile struck its main fuel line. The Sword of Conquest lost 3 weapon arrays to a shotgun blast of accelerated gravel. Ship after ship of the mighty Third Fleet found itself outgunned by creatures who'd turned the simple act of throwing rocks into an art form. "They're not following standard tactical doctrine," the tactical officer reported with growing panic. "No formation flying, no coordinated attacks. Each ship is operating independently using unpredictable maneuvers." Because humans, Zethkar realized with growing horror, were persistence hunters. They didn't overwhelm prey with superior numbers or technology. They chased it until it collapsed from exhaustion. And they'd brought that hunting instinct to space warfare. As the Third Fleet's proud dreadnoughts burned and died around him, Zethkar finally understood why the Council had truly feared these primitive humans. Not because they were advanced, but because they were the galaxy's apex predators wearing the mask of civilization. He reached for the communication console with a trembling manipulator. "All ships, immediate retreat, emergency jump to hyperspace." But it was too late. The humans had learned to hunt in 3 dimensions. The last thing Commander Zethkar saw was a chunk of Earth iron, accelerated to 0.4 C, growing larger in the viewport. In that final moment, he wondered if perhaps the hegemony had misunderstood the meaning of evolution's greatest lesson. It's not the strongest species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one most adaptable to change. And humanity had spent millions of years adapting to a world that never stopped trying to kill them.